This is Josh from Vague Industries, and you're listening to the Builder Sessions.
Welcome to the Builder Sessions, a podcast where we chat with your favorite builders.
We get to know them, their stories, and hopefully inspire you to get off the couch and build something cool. I'm Hoff.
And I'm Rosie.
And on this episode, we have Josh Mazerolle, owner of Vague Industries and star of DeathWish.
We chat about how embracing your failures is the fastest way to grow, how one's ability to thrash and be self-disciplined is directly associated with one's happiness, and how incremental progress scales exponentially. All this and more within the context of automotive and fabrication.
Please enjoy our interview with Josh.
Josh, welcome to the show. It's awesome to have you.
I'm stoked to be here, dude.
Long story short, it's not even a long story. Josh reached out to us on Instagram, and at first I was like, we had this this message in our inbox, and I was like, there's no way, because I've seen the Hilux and and some of those builds that you have on your YouTube channel, and I'm like, holy smokes, we got to get this guy on. So we're like, yes, let's do this. So it's awesome to have you on, and we really appreciate your time this morning. To get started, for people who don't know who the hell you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into fabricating.
So my name's Josh Mazerolle, and I currently own a company called Vague Industries. Actually, I've got like a web of stories and companies and directions that led me here and where I'm going.
That's awesome.
But Vague Industries is a chassis fab shop. I specialize in chassis and suspension. But it was like my primary focus was like endurance off-road race vehicles.
Okay.
And there's not a lot of that on the East Coast. So like some of our clients were on the West Coast, desert race stuff. And what there is a lot of over here is something called Pro Mega Trucks. And that's like a lighter, faster, higher horsepower, more nimble monster truck. And it's basically like stadium racing between grandstands. So I built my own CNC tube cutter so that I can just draw everything on the computer, hit print, it pops the chassis out the other end, basically. And we've got our production chassis and build axle housings and wheels and all kinds of stuff. But the problem I had with that is it's something strange about the trucks versus cars when it comes to like attention and marketing. Is like there, in my opinion, in most cases, is a lot more that goes into building a four-wheel drive truck than there is a two-wheel drive car. But the generalized average, I guess, like the average viewer consumer attention doesn't care at all about trucks. It's a much smaller market.
That's interesting.
And yeah, it's something I've recognized over the years. I've run my own company for 15 years now, but like I've been in this space since I was a child. Like when I was in kindergarten, right? My teachers wrote this like journal for me, and it was like, Josh made a new friend, Christopher. Josh likes to draw. Josh, whatever. And at the very bottom, it said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it had a bunch of check boxes. It was like nurse, secretary, fireman, whatever. And they checked other, and they wrote build monster trucks. So 5-year-old Josh knew that he wanted to build monster trucks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, super cool.
So did you have anyone in your family, like what inspired that in that 5-year-old Josh?
I think everybody my age was into Ninja Turtles, dinosaurs, and monster trucks.
Yeah, fair.
And I just like, I figured like the operation wasn't available to be a Ninja Turtle yet, and like
Even though you
monster
wanted
trucks
to
seem
be.
more
We're all,
reasonable.
we're all still waiting, man. We're all still waiting.
Totally. Yeah, I'm gonna transition.
Yeah.
um so like ever since I was a child, that was where my attention was. And I remember in third grade, we went around the room morning meeting, and we all said what we wanted to be when we grew up. And at that point, um I said I want to build suspension. And I hardly knew what that meant, but it sounded good. I remember my dad was building a like a 85 Toyota pickup, and he ordered some Skyjack or leaf springs. And when I came home, I got home before him. They were sitting on the front porch, and I looked him over, and I was like very curious about him. And when my dad got home, he was pumped. His lift kit came in, and I was like, okay, springs, what do they do? Taught me what they did, and how it made the truck bigger. I was like, okay, well, springs are suspension. Suspension makes the truck bigger. Bigger trucks are monster trucks. Sweet. Okay, suspension builds monster trucks. Good. I want to do suspension. And it just sort of snowballed from there. And I went so far as trying to. I did my own limited production proprietary prototype run of my own coilover shocks.
Oh wow! I had no idea.
Yeah, the manufacturer I chose was the wrong one, and I basically bought like $30,000 worth of scrap metal.
Oh man!
And like I through my and like stop me if I'm going on tangents.
Oh
here,
no,
but,
go! That's what this show's about.
So like through my whole like I guess you'd call it my life journey, I never had anybody close in life to sort of teach me about business. And I'm 35 now, and I found that would have been a useful role model to seek out early on. Because, I knew how to weld and cut, and I was like, okay, well, if I do that for somebody and they give me money, business, stonks. And so I just sort of went on that model for a long time. And, I've had some thought shifts on that recently. We can get into that later, but yeah, that's sort of where it started. Was I wanted to build monster trucks, and that's basically what I do right now.
From kindergarten right till now. That's how many people can say,
Kindergarten,
I
and
want
who
to do
knows
this.
who knows like when that really started? Was I 3? Was I 2 pushing my monster trucks around? Like, I'm gonna build this.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it's neat. It's neat that I've been able to, like, most people don't even know what they want to do when they get out of school, go into college. I knew from the beginning. And like one thing I got to like high school age, and I was like, well, there isn't a job building suspension, I don't think. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just be a machinist, because machinists, they still get to be like creative a little bit. I get to work with metal and make stuff. So I went down that road a little bit, and I did a lot of manual machining. And when I got into the real world, I realized that manual machining wasn't really a thing anymore. So I became a button pusher for a little bit.
Yep.
Hit the button, start the part cycle, check it in between cycles. And I learned a lot. I learned what tight tolerances are, and how to be precise, and how metal moves once you cut it, and all sorts of stuff. And then when I started applying what I'd learned in machine shop and machine trade to automotive, I realized that those tolerances are far too tight, and they'll never work in a car. Like I remember for my senior project in high school, I built from ground up. I built a Toyota pickup truck, and I did a solid axle swap. I put an extra cab on a regular cab frame. I shortened the bed all up, and I put a small block Chevy in it, and I made the motor mounts in machine shop class, and I made them to exacting tolerances, which meant they just didn't fit. Like I got them in, but it was not user friendly.
And did the whole truck move whenever you started it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, starting this new company that I'm in now, Vague Industries, I've been in business for, I think, 6 years now, 6.5 years. And the attention, it's hard to get attention in the truck space. It's not impossible. Plenty of people are doing it, but it's much harder than cars. So I had this, I had a client that I considered him my younger brother, even though we weren't related, but I considered him to be my younger brother. And he had a 70s Toyota pickup truck that he finally started making some decent money, as a professional athlete. And he wanted to drop the truck off, and he wanted something to show for it when he came back from, doing his road tour. And he didn't want to have a list of, McDonald's receipts and just crap. He wanted like something that he could be proud of. And so while he was gone on the road, I started building his truck for him. He just wanted better brakes, a little more power and handling. And so I built a tube chassis for it, and didn't really tell him what I was doing.
Naturally. So I built a tube chassis for it.
Yeah, so I built a tube chassis for it and dropped the body on it, and we were going to LS swap it and put it on Crown Vic suspension. And like I got it to a roller, and then he broke some bones and he couldn't tour anymore. And then the money stopped flowing in, and money can make friends and make enemies, but usually enemies. And our relationship fell apart, and it went sour. So he ended up taking the truck, and there was a bunch of drama with all that. We don't need to get into that. This truck was something that I had pictured for a long time, and I was like pumped to be able to build it. Like I've had this vision of this build I've really wanted to create, and I was doing it with this guy, and that all fell apart, and I didn't get to complete the mission. Not to mention, local social drama. So there was a truck that was the same model. It was a 77 Toyota Hilux that had been abandoned in the desert of Phoenix for 15 years. And my buddy Doug and I tried to buy that thing for years, like 3 years. And I went out to the Mint 400 to go do some shock tuning on a couple of desert cars. And my buddy happened to be in Phoenix at the same time. And he calls me up. He goes, dude, I was finally able to buy that truck, $250. I'm like, no way. So instead of riding home with the race team, I got dropped off in Phoenix with my buddy with this truck. And we spent 2 weeks trying to get it running. And then I was going to drive it home to New Hampshire in stock form. So it's like 3,000 miles. And we got it running. I left, and he gave me like a handful of tools. These tools, it was like a Phillips head screwdriver, a tire iron, vice grips, and 4 zip ties.
At least it was a Phillips head.
Yeah, that's true. You can use a penny as a flathead.
Yeah, there you go. So it wasn't a Robertson or something.
So I take off, and it's starting to make a little bit of noise, like valve train noise. And, it's not super bad, but it's definitely noticeable. And, there's so many, like there's no window seals, the shifter rat, like it's just such a noisy truck. And I ended up deciding that it needed a valve adjustment. And I'm just south of Flagstaff at this point. I'd come through Sedona and up the canyons, and so I was able to use my toolkit that I had to do a valve adjustment.
Quote toolkit.
Quote toolkit. Yeah. I found a beer can on the side of the road, which I just happened to know is generally 0.0035 thick. So 2 layers would do the intake, and 3 layers would do the exhaust.
Okay, that's incredible. Like, don't just go over that. Let's stay there for a second, because that's exactly what we're trying to communicate with this show. Well, one of the things is that you don't need $1 million toolbox and all this fancy equipment to get some stuff done in your garage and to have some fun with it. So know the tolerance. Oh, obviously the background with the tolerances. I don't know how you figured out the thickness of a beer can. Maybe that's another show. But you knew just from past experiences or whatever it was, that the thickness, and you're looking around and you're being resourceful and you worked with what you had, and that was okay. So yeah, I just want to commend you on that. That's really cool.
So instead of feeler gauges, we just need beer cans in our toolboxes, and we're good, right?
Two beer. Well, depending on the spec, right?
Yeah, as long as it's divisible by 3.5 thou, you're totally in.
Awesome.
Also, kids, stay in math. Okay, perfect.
So yeah, I mean, but that's just it, is like a lifetime of experiences. So like incremental progress scales exponentially, and that's like everywhere. That's, we're talking about compounding is really what that is. And you can compound knowledge and intellect as long as you practice it, and that's all that really is. So anyways, I do a valve adjustment on the side of the road with a beer can and a tire iron. And
I love that so much.
Yeah. And it didn't fix the problem.
Oh, okay.
So now I go into Flagstaff. This is funny. I haven't told this story in a while. So I go into Flagstaff and I stop at an O'Reilly's, and I'm like, I got to do an oil change. Because if it's not valve train, it's something worse. And the oil has been sitting in there for 15 years, and who knows how old it was before it sat.
Yeah.
And I try my best to catch it, but I dump all the oil on the parking lot, change the oil, ask for forgiveness. And I mean, that's where it came from. It came from in the ground. So
I mean,
yeah,
it's just
everything's
cyclical,
natural.
right? Yeah.
There's nothing that's not natural. So
I mean, you're just returning the dinosaurs to their home, right?
that's it. Yeah, planting dinosaurs.
Exactly. So, perfect.
And I'm like, now I'm 2 hours away, and it's got kind of like a knock, and I can head back south and sort of with my tail between my legs and figure out what to do back in Phoenix where I've got support. Or I could say fuck it and just push on.
Yeah.
Can we say the F word on this show?
Well, you just did, so let's rock and roll.
Okay. All right. So I just push on, and I'm like, I'm gonna see how far I can make it.
Yeah.
Maybe I make it all the way. And I made it to Albuquerque, and I'm smoked. I'm tired. And I pull into this hotel, and I sleep in the cab of the truck. And when I wake up, it's 16 degrees out. The interior of the cab is all frozen. Oh, and I get up, I walk into the hotel like I own the place, like I haven't been sleeping in my truck. I get some continental breakfast, and I sit right next to this police officer who I believe is also doing the theft of services, because like he's in his uniform eating waffles.
Yeah.
And then I just continue on, and this thing's like making a bad noise, and then my knee leans against the shifter. And as soon as I put pressure on the shifter, the like knock goes away. So I was like, okay, well, there's a bushing that's bad in the shifter. So I'm like, now I'm not worried about anything.
Yeah.
Because it's just got to be the transmission resonating. And I keep going, and it starts getting louder and louder. And I put my knee against the shifter again, and it didn't go away. I'm like, oh no. And so now it's definitely the engine. And I pull into, I think, Santa Rosa or something. And I pulled off just because I saw a sign that said Dinosaur Museum. And like, who doesn't want to go see dinosaurs?
Of course. I mean, you just released them into the wild. Why not go back to their homeland, right?
Totally. Yeah, it's full circle. So I stop at an auto parts store, and I have some of the older gentlemen come out, take a look at it. And I was like, just tell me it's not what I think it is. And they're like, no, it's what you think it is. You're done. So I called everywhere, and I was like, I'll buy something else as long as it's cool to tow this home with. But I'm not just going to buy anything to buy anything. I was like, if I can get like a cool 60s Cadillac or something, I'll just flat tow this. Or if I can get another one of these trucks, I'll flat tow. Couldn't find anything in the local area. I checked junkyards, everything. And I got on Craigslist, and I found a guy in Amarillo, which was like 120 miles away, who had another one of these. In his ad, he said that he had a parts truck that he built this with. So I called him up, and I was like, hey, I'm not interested in your whole one. Maybe I am, but what I'm really interested in is that parts truck. Do you have an engine? He said he had an engine that was claimed to run, but he never heard it run. And I worked a deal where if I could get to him, he would let me use his facilities. And I didn't know if his facilities was a gravel driveway or like a shop or what he had, but he said whatever he had, he'd let me use to work on this truck. And at this point, the engine's really bad, and it was a wrist pin knock, which is what's better than a rod knock,
Oh,
but
that's fair.
it's
Yeah.
still bad. So now the only way I can drive this truck is I need to keep full engine load on it. And what and what that meant was that and it had to be under like 1200 RPM. So I mean,
First gear, the whole drive.
yeah, so I'm in fourth gear at 1200 RPM. Full engine load means I either need to ride the brakes, which not good for 120 miles, or be full acceleration and full decel and just back and forth. So it's like for 120 miles, I was at 25 to 30 miles an hour going bop, boo, bop, boo, bop. It took like 6 hours. And now I can't ride on I-40 because I'm doing 25 miles an hour. So I ended up on this like dirt road. And for like 80 miles, there was nothing. There wasn't telephone poles, there wasn't houses, there was no cell service. I've got a bottle of water and some pocket fruit from the hotel. And it's like just going down this dirty, dusty road where in every direction you looked, it was like you could have dropped me in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
There was nothing to be seen. I pull up at this guy's house at like 9:30 at night. And when I pull into he had like a real shop, which was sick. It's just a hobbyist, but like a super nice hobbyist shop. And I pull in at 9:30, shut it off. It's like, kill it. And it just blows steam. It was like, it's done. It was like a story, like a movie.
Just crawls in. Hey,
Ready for a rest.
Done. Yeah.
Totally. So this dude's name is Joe True, and complete stranger. And now I have to rely on the kindness of the stranger because like I only have a tire iron. Oh, mind you, when I did that oil change, I only had a tire iron and the drain plug was a smaller size. So I took the beer can and wrapped it around the thing so I could change the size of the tire iron.
That's awesome.
That's incredible.
So this dude not only sold me an engine that was claimed to run, but he and let me use his space, but he stayed up all night with me and worked just as hard as I did on swapping this engine.
Wow.
And I was on my way to Dallas to pick up a friend at the airport. So I left like on a Tuesday and I had to pick her up Thursday at 3:00. And so now in the middle of this journey, I'm doing a motor swap in the middle of the night.
In some random shop.
At some random shop, some random dude, but
yeah.
And we got it done at like 4:30. New engines in the bed of the truck, or old engines in the bed of the truck. And I take off and I make it halfway there, and the whole tread of the tire comes off because their old tires have been sitting in the desert.
Right.
So now I got some tires swapped out right off the side of the road. It was like a 20-minute stop. It was unbelievable. And I picked up my friend at the airport. I showed up at 3 minutes after she stepped out onto the concrete. Like, couldn't have been better time.
Wow.
And there was like, there's no sleep, just straight through. So I ended up, I have some friends down in Houston, and after I was done with this event that was in Dallas, I was like, I'm going to go swing down, see my friends in Houston, because I'm in the area. I mean, it's like a 4-hour drive out of the way.
Yeah.
And one thing I realized through this is that this is the point of this, is that I always make an excuse to go see my friends in Houston, when the reality is I'm using my friends in Houston as an excuse to get far enough south in the country that the only way out is I-10 past a restaurant in Louisiana called Steamboat Bill's.
Okay.
And all I want is Steamboat Bill's, and I'm using my friends as an excuse to go 5 hours out of the way.
Yeah.
But when I went down there, but I pulled into Houston, it's like this new engine's like puking oil as fast as it's drinking gasoline. And like, I might be able to make it home, but it's going to cost me a fortune in oil. And then it started puking coolant all over the windshield. And like, it's not good. It runs like crap. And I'm going to try to limp it home. But when I showed up at my buddy's place, I had a brainstorm. I was like, hey, wait a minute. Can I use your shop for like 2 or 3 days? I want to do a Crown Vic suspension swap in this thing. And just because it's super wide, and I wanted to make the stance of that original truck that I was building for, my friend.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, no problem. So I've got something called the might as well syndrome. It's like, while you're in there, you might as well this. You might as well clean. If you're going to take that out, you might as well clean it up, paint it. If you're going to, might as well upgrade this. And so I had to pull the engine out to get, all the front suspension and stuff out. I went and picked up front. No, this is the only truck I have, the only mode of transportation. So I have to try to get everything I'm going to use before I tear this thing apart. And so I got to a point where the cab came off it, the bed came off it, the engine's out of it, the frame's cut in half. I'm living in the fornicatorium. I'm showering in a rain gutter in a Texas hurricane. I was there for 2 months, not 3 days.
Full off frame restoration, I hear.
Yeah.
And
might as well restore it, whatever.
yeah, pretty much. I cut all the floors out, made new floors, new firewall.
Of course you did. Yeah, why not? Might as well.
And I couldn't justify putting the smoking, ticking, knocking 4-cylinder back in it. So I ended up picking up a 5.3 liter.
Yeah.
And which is essentially it's not a tube chassis, but essentially the exact build that I was going to do for my friend. And, during all of this, my friends and family were like, dude, burn the truck, get on an airplane, just come home. I'm like, yeah. I couldn't communicate to them that this was like, I exist out of spite. I'm like, this isn't about the truck. And I was just not willing to, I've got no quit in me. And so now I got the engine sticking out of the hood. The tires are sticking 100% outside the body, and it's just radical looking. And I ended up building this small community of friends. I was in my Texas friend's wedding while I was there. I became family with these people. And, it was like every day, everybody would come over to the barn where I was living with the snakes and the spiders. And it was
in the fornicatorium.
There was some not good times. I was losing my mind, actually. And one of my buddies was like, dude, you know what this needs? It looks all wide and rowdy. The engine out the hood needs a turbo. I'm like, no, I'm so done putting time and money into this thing. I can't. I've got to get home. I've got work to do. I've got stuff to do. I shouldn't even be doing this. So the next day he comes over with a turbo, blow off valve, wastegate, all the things I need. He goes, you can have it if you put it on. I'm like, all right, well, I can't not.
Okay, might as well.
Yeah, so I get this thing together, and it's time to leave and head home. And the first 100 miles or 200 miles, whatever, I had to stop 35 times to fix or diagnose this thing. And it took days because there's so many bugs in this thing. I built it with limited resources. And through that, I still have a limited toolkit when I'm on the road. Now I did pick up, scraps of metal, which I can use as little wedges or if it's got a burr on it, I can use it as a knife or whatever. And so I'm forced to rely on the kindness of strangers, and everybody who helped me out of the kindness of their heart and expected nothing in return, I had them use a Sharpie and sign the B pillar of the truck. And it was this is a white pickup truck where it's all sun faded, so it's not high gloss anymore. So it's like a chalkboard. And, I had a boatload of signatures on this thing. And, when I got home, that's when, or during this, I realized that I had all of this attention that I was getting from this little pickup truck. And, I ended up getting hit up by Motor Trend, and they wanted it on a show. And then, I ended up doing this this giant media tour. We went out to Hoonigan, and we filmed with Motor Trend. We filmed with Netflix. I've got my own show now on Amazon Prime. And it was I drove this truck across the country 9 times in 2 years. Wow. And it's been through 13 engines, 13 transmissions. I've done parking lot, crank and rod swaps on the side of the road. And, it started as this basically a little budget truck, and it still is, but and ended up with 1100 horsepower, and we 4-linked it, and it got really, really dumb. But so what I realized is that this truck has a bunch of attention, and attention has inertia. So once you get that ball rolling, you have to push it as hard and as fast and as far as you can. And you can be the best fabricator in the world, but if nobody knows who you are and nobody knows that, like, what good is it? How can you market that? And like, my whole game was off-road stuff, but I was getting no attention with the off-road stuff. As crazy or well-engineered or nice as it was, nobody cared. They see a Toyota pickup truck with an engine and a turbo out the hood with some rusty metal fenders on it. Like, for some reason, it gets everybody's attention. And, you know, we've had millions and millions and millions of impressions on this vehicle. It's been featured in almost every single automotive media outlet. Yeah. And part of it's the story, but a lot of it is just like, you can't take a bad picture of it because it's so like visually stimulating.
Yeah.
And, you know, with that, you know, I ended up in a roundabout way, because I live this wild lifestyle, that like, I'm on the road, I make myself vulnerable to pretty much anything, all these experiences. I'm like, I ended up with a deal where I've got my own show on Amazon Prime. It's called DeathWish. And the whole premise of the show is about building community and exposing the kindness of strangers, but it's hidden around hot rods and wild adventures.
Yeah.
And this little pickup truck sort of started all of that, because, you know, I said I did 9 trips across the country in 2 years. And on those trips, I had this secret little rule that I was only allowed to carry whatever tools I could carry in one hand. The rest, I was forced to rely on the kindness of strangers. And what that does is that, like, the only people who are going to help you are incredible people.
Yeah.
The people who aren't going to help you, like, well, you're not engaging with them anyways. So in some ways, it's almost like this little psychological trap for amazing humans.
Yeah.
And now I've got so many signatures on the back of this truck, you almost can't fit another one. There's hundreds of signatures. And like, it's beautiful because that's hundreds of times that I've broke down and been restored through the kindness of a stranger. And what it really shows is just that there's still a lot of amazing humans on this planet. And most people are full of love and kindness, and they want to help, just like you and all your friends, you know? Yeah. So that is sort of like the MO of the show. Like, yeah, we want to build crazy things and have a lot of fun, but it's really just to build community and have a positive impact on society.
I think that's so awesome with the community piece too, because I'm not being in the automotive side, I'm more in the woodworking side, but we just recently had a Street Wheelers here, a big car show. And when you start talking and opening up with people and going out on a limb, the community is it's so welcoming, and they want to share their knowledge. And here I'm thinking like, oh, these people, like, I don't know very much. They're probably just going to bat an eye at me. No, they're, you know, I talked with a guy yesterday for 25 minutes about this new Audi that he built. And I was kind of relieved after. It's like, this is so cool. Like, the community and willing to help out and share their secrets and explain what they did. Like, I think something about the car community, builder community, it's just kind of breathtaking almost. Like, people are willing to take their shirt off their back. An example with the Hilux, right? They're helping you. You have limited tools. They're ready to help you out. And I think that speaks volumes on where this community direction can go. And I think that's pretty cool that you can try to say, hey, I'm just going to take these few hand tools and resorting on strangers and other people, and you manage to build something. I think that speaks volumes. So I think that's a
Totally.
really cool story from the Hilux.
Yeah. And it's been, the whole journey's been really interesting. It's been a journey of self-development, for myself. And I think that publishing on a large platform like Amazon we do well on YouTube and Facebook Watch and stuff as well. But publishing on a large platform, basically my journey of self-development and self-mastery is inspiring to others. And I get a lot of emails and messages that are just like, some of them are gut wrenching and heartwarming. And they're like, thanks to you, with the relationship with my dad has been restored. And like,
Wow.
and we get out in the shop and, my son this, and it's like, it's all just like warm. So it's like making my hair stand
Yeah,
up right
for
now.
sure.
About
Yeah.
these messages. It's like, I'm just doing me as hard as I can, and it's having like such a huge positive impact on all of these people. And so I've got a I don't know if it's a motto or what you'd call it, but I'd like to be a billionaire, but not one of financial stature. Somebody who positively affects the lives of over 1 billion people. And I, depending on how you look at it, I feel like I've already achieved that.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, so if you look at your life as like an ecosystem, I am the center of my ecosystem. You are the center of your ecosystem. And your attention and effort is like a Doppler effect, right? A gradually spreading effect influenced by a single action. And it spreads out into your systems and subsystems, like the other people in your life. Everybody in your life plays a supporting role in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And, especially when you start talking about real business, if you own a company, then, you have a task or a problem to solve, and you need to put in a system or subsystem to manage that, which often is another human. So like your measurement of success is your ability to adapt your goals to meet somebody else's goals, because then you both have a common goal where you can double your attention and effort, and you can truly create something greater than yourself. So, now you have a larger impact, and your attention and effort, compounded with theirs and everybody else in your system, then the energy ripples out, through them, through their ecosystems. And it's like, you have do you guys have children?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So like the energy that you put into your child in your life, they carry that to school with them, into their teachers carry it home, they throw it into their friends, and like, like that goes really far. And that's just like, so you have an extremely important role in society on like how you direct your attention and effort and energy, like what you do with that. And I'm not trying to get like all charge your crystals and astrological, but like your attention and effort really matters.
Of course. Yeah. I think, okay, so this is incredible. I'm loving this conversation. I want to ask you about when you're driving down that road in that truck, going up to this guy's shop who you've never met before, and you said you had this secret little thought of like relying on the kindness of others, right?
Well, that particular instance, that wasn't my goal. That was my set of circumstances that I had been handed.
Okay.
And then I learned from that experience.
So that planted the seed.
That planted the seed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you had that seed planted, my question is, what was the light bulb moment, or what was the impetus for you being like, wait a second, like let's test this out. Let's see if there's more. You know what I mean? Like, what was I don't know if it was a desire or something inside of you that felt this connection with this other human that was incredible, and the kindness, and saying like, wait a second, there's hope for our world. Let's shine some light on this.
I think it really started when, after I left the barn in Texas, when I met so many people like back to back who were just like, anything you need. You want food, you need a shirt, you need a shower. I got these parts. Let me help you fix this. I understand wiring. I'll take care of that. Like, yeah. It was just like people wanted to help, and people want to be part of something greater than themselves.
Yeah.
And
so you were impacted by someone else's energy and someone else's goodwill, right?
and one of the things I learned on this is like, I do a lot of fun, what I think is fun word exercises. Like what is the ROI on empathy? What's the return on investment of empathy? If you invest empathy, what's the return? So it's understanding every time. The more empathy you employ, the more understanding you get. If the goal is to get a return of trust, what do you need to invest? Vulnerability. And whether that's like emotional or financial or whatever, it's like, it's always the same formula. The more vulnerable you make yourself, the more opportunity for a high trust return you have.
Yep.
And something that I recognize within myself is that I've always been willing to make giant sacrifices and take high risk. And that hasn't always worked for me, but it's like, it's something that I'm willing to do. And when I go out on these crazy road trips and I only bring, this limited toolkit with me, what I'm doing is making myself extremely vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And what has proven to work every single time is that when I'm in my worst position, I'm super broke down, I'm in the middle of the desert, and there's essentially no hope, like I've never not made it yet. Magic happens. And I call it magic. You could call it faith if you're religious, whatever you want to call it. It's like, it works every time. And the only way I would learn that it works is by making myself vulnerable to that experience. If I never made myself vulnerable, I'd never be able to prove to myself that it works. So one of the key things here is that I learned that I gained maximum control by releasing control. So give it up if you want to get it. It's like this weird paradox. And I think that it works that way with almost everything. If you want something, give it away.
Yeah, for sure. That's it. I love it. I'm kind of philosophical by nature. I love having these types of conversations. So I'm going to get a little more philosophical here, because in order to do that, you'd have to leave your ego at the door.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Like one of my observations, the car community is incredible, but there is some ego in the car community too. Let's be honest.
Certainly. It can definitely be found pretty easily if you want it.
Yeah. If you're looking for it. Right.
Yeah.
And so you having all of these skills and having this experience, and I'm sure a person in your similar situation with a gigantic ego wouldn't be able to relinquish control, wouldn't be able to allow to be vulnerable, wouldn't be able to allow these people to help them out of the kindness of their heart, because they need that control over it, right?
Yep.
And so what you're doing is, in a sense, very countercultural, right? Because that's
right.
Our culture is very egocentric. It's very me. What can I get out of this? Blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And so
direct exchange. Yeah.
Yeah. And because of the fact that all of us have a little bit of ego, I want you to talk about, if you don't mind, was there a bit of a conflict in those first couple interactions with people where you, not necessarily egotistical, but like, okay, I gotta give this up, or I gotta be completely vulnerable? Were you fighting against your ego a little bit, or were you just like, let's go?
I fought against it much, because like I saw the bigger picture of
there
like
it is.
Well, it was more the bigger picture that like, well, this isn't going to happen without their assistance. How would they like to do it?
Yeah.
And
you're just caught with your pants down. You're like, I'm screwed either way, so we got to do this.
Yeah. And over the years, I've learned that, like, if you go back to your ecosystem thing, right, where your measurement of success is by your ability to adapt your goals to meet others, then you can have common goals. Well, it's like that changes the whole perspective on the words, how can I help you? Because I now understand that helping you helps me. Rising tide floats all ships. So like, it's sort of I've taken more of a philanthropist point of view on life. It's like, the more I can help everybody else, the more that helps me. And it's like, in some strange twist, it's like that's feeding my ego to the largest extent.
Yeah.
But also like everyone else wins too.
But like, I mean, this is such a philosophical like it is in giving that we receive, right? It's one
Yeah,
of those, well, and every religious tradition has this philosophy, and
totally.
it's interesting and that it connects so well with so many people because it's kind of true.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, a lot of like I think that a lot of people are not willing to release control, and this is just like my assumption. I don't know. Everybody's different,
No,
but
I think
not
you're
willing to
right. I think
release.
you're 100% right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are not willing to really release control because they can't see the whole formula, and they are looking too much at like a tangible return, like a tangible direct exchange of service. And whereas like what I'm seeing is this big giant intangible system that all works together, where if I can help you with this, I know it's going to help me just out of faith in the process of the way, I don't know, the universe works. Like it's going to help me later. I might not, if I help you change the tire on your car trailer, like I'm not necessarily worried about what are you going to give me immediately after I do that, because I know it comes back to me. I'm not worried about it. Yeah,
That, that
it's been
control
it's been a fun journey.
that control's hard to even thinking like in for myself too, like trying to give up control on a certain build or doing something, and you're kind of like, no, I'm just gonna do it myself. Like I know how to do it, but to resort or to rely on somebody or to ask for help and just step back, I think that's huge. Like to be able to get out of your comfort zone of, okay, this is my area, this is what I want to do, and then to step back and let somebody else do it. I think you have to almost get into those uncomfortable situations to be able to grow and figure out that bigger picture.
I mean, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. If you're not like trying really hard at something and focusing your attention and effort, you're not growing. And if you're not growing and getting better, what are you doing with your life? Nothing. You're already dead.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think
Boom.
so like, and I think that that's kind of what this this podcast is about, is like a little bit of self-mastery, like,
Of course.
and focusing on craft. But it's the same thing. If you're not focusing your attention and effort, as to whatever degree you think is necessary, like to your fullest extent, you're not growing. And humans are extremely resistant to change. Like it's just the way we are. Any change, we don't like it. Even if we want it and we know it's good for us, we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
It's something with our like habit forming subconscious mind. Like
we don't like being vulnerable.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Right. And being humble enough to admit that we need to change.
Yeah.
That's part of it anyways.
Yeah, for sure. I know that like, if I could go back in time and talk to a younger Josh, this has been, I'll make myself vulnerable here. Something that I just realized a couple years ago, like 2.5 years ago, was that, like I've been, for the past 20 years, I've been on this quest to understand if we're getting all like philosophical here, like we're not even talking about building stuff, but, I've been on a quest to understand the secret of happiness, the formula for happiness, right? Because I've always said that, like, well, I need to work hard, but also I need to be happy. Like, money doesn't matter as long as you're happy, and all these things that like revolve around happiness. Happiness is the goal, right? You want to live a happy life. Well, what does that mean, and what does that look like? And it's led through 20 years of contemplative introspection, and in that process, a couple years ago, I realized that it's that what was holding me back, because I've always been a pretty neutral person. I'm never super down in the dumps, but I generally don't have a lot of super ups, just right in the middle all the time. And I recognized that I lacked self-discipline. I had absolutely no self-discipline at all. And what got me where I got to in life was the fact that I was willing to make enormous sacrifice and take high risks. And that will get you 70, 80% of the way there almost every time. But I didn't have the follow through. And when I learned that I didn't have self-discipline, that was one of the most painful things I'd ever done or experienced. because it was always a vocabulary word. It never applied to me. Like that was a word for somebody else. I don't know. I never thought of applying that to myself and recognizing that I'm the reason why I'm not where I want to be and why I don't have the things I want to have and doing the things that I want to do. And it was like, that was a huge sting. So that's been the past couple of years has been the most difficult part of my life's journey, has been, focusing the attention and effort and self-mastery and, where does it matter and how do I push as hard as I can in that direction.
And look at the fruits that are coming from it.
Totally.
In the past couple of years, right?
Yep, for sure.
That's amazing.
For sure.
So before we started the podcast, you talked about, before we hit record, you're talking about your ability to thrash. and when you talked about, you kind of breezed over it, but we talked about, you said you built your own CNC tube cutter on your own. And side note, that's a huge task in itself.
Totally.
And all these things that you've kind of gone after and learned, and you're just, because we don't wake up, or we're not born and then we just like have a pill and we have all this knowledge, right? And building a CNC, we just bought for our shop class at the school, we just bought a 4x4 plasma CNC table.
Yep.
And it's already like, it comes with the parts. I just put it together and then I got to figure out how to use it, using open builds or whatever. But you had to step back. You probably had to buy the black box or whatever it is and buy everything, all the pieces that you needed to figure out programming, all that stuff on your own. How did you get to the point where, and you kind of touched on it with this discipline piece, but you're like, a lot of people would be afraid and see this big mountain in front of them. Okay, I want to do this CNC thing. I don't have $25,000 to buy this piece of machinery. I know I could piece it together for a lot cheaper, but that would require, well, I mean, your background in CNC, like you call it button pushing, but that knowledge that you have there probably helped too. But where did that drive and that thrash mentality, what started it, and like, where did it come from?
Okay, so I've done some psychoanalysis on this, where I felt it was out of necessity, and in my quest for happiness, I was, one of the questions I asked myself, I'm like, well, what do you like to do? And I realized that where my joy came from was within the creative process, and exactly what the creative process meant, I hadn't quite narrowed down at that time. But since then, I have discovered exactly what I meant by that. And the pinpoint, the pivot, or the focal point within the creative process is the problem solving. It's like, I love to sit on the computer and design a full chassis for a new car. But then when it comes time to put 300 hours of labor in and actually make it, I'm way less thrilled about it. And like, do it because that's what you got to do. But I'm super stoked about the creative process and the problem solving. So what I asked a friend of mine a while back, it was a new friend. He'd stopped by and he wanted to come help. And we were just making small talk. And I was like, hey, Charlie, what do you think you're best at? Just a general blanket question. And, he didn't really have a good answer because he hadn't thought about it yet, but he returned the question to me and I was like, well, I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't ready for that. I haven't thought about it either. But then it forced me to think about it. And I realized what I'm best at is problem solving. Also happens to be what I like to do the most. And necessity is the mother of all invention, or something like that. And I recognize that, I built my own CNC plasma table too. So this was the one I have now is currently the third version that I've built over the years. Because each time it's like, well, I'd like it better if it was like this. I'd like, rack and pinion, but I want a spring-loaded gearbox so there's no backlash. I want, all these different things. And it's like you start with the problem, identify the enemy, and develop a strategy to defeat it. And, you know, like it's not, when you look at the machine mechanically, they're very simple. So,
Yeah.
so like, that's where my mind works well mechanically. I can visualize and these complex assemblies pretty well. And it was like making the physical machine not that hard. And then the only thing I need to learn is how to make it move. And it's such a common thing that it's not that hard to figure out. There's forums, there's programs, and like, it's just, you can only focus on the things that you can control, and you can only control the things that are in front of you. So like, just move in that direction and deal with each obstacle as it comes. You know, you want to learn how to weld. You're not going to learn how to weld unless you grab a welder and start welding.
Yeah.
And like, once you lay a bead, you go, okay, well, now what? You find a professional, find an answer, or experiment on your own, and like, you'll get better just by doing. And that's kind of the way that building my machines went. You know, when it came time to build the CNC tube cutter, it's much more complicated than a two-dimensional flat plate, but it operates on the similar fundamentals. So, you know, this thing will notch one end of the tube, and that notch might fit into a node that has 8 other tubes in it. So it's got 8 other notches that it needs to fit perfectly into. It'll notch that, feed out. I have an air scribe, a tool change that comes over, scribes and marks the bend location, moves out, marks the next, and then cuts the next notch, and the tube drops off. Now you've got a straight tube with a bend location mark. You slide that into the bender, line up the mark, bend it, and the whole assembly fits perfectly on, you know, your chassis or whatever it's supposed to fit on.
That's so awesome.
Jeez.
And there's like, I never touch a grinder. It's sick.
Yeah. It's Lego.
It's basically cheating.
It's Lego.
Probably took
It's
a lot
Legos.
of time to develop that though, right? And perfect it and make sure like the whole thought process and skill sets to be able to chunk the information of, okay, I'm going to build this CNC tube cutter and then to chunk it down into more manageable parts.
Well, that's what it is. And I think that's got to be the thought process, is like, you have a general image of what it needs to look like and what it needs to do. And then you break it into pieces. It's like, okay, well, the tailstock now needs to travel down an axis and have a rotary axis on it. And that rotary axis needs to be conductive to electricity and clamp the tube so that it moves the tube. I'm like, okay, well, now design that assembly. And you just move in, you quantize the whole project into smaller tasks.
Smaller enemies to defeat.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that one of the best things you can do for yourself psychologically is, you know, every single day you wake up and you're fighting, an invisible, slippery enemy that knows you as well as you know it. It's this level of resistance that you put on yourself. I don't want this. I don't feel like this. And like, you make any excuse you can to not do that one task, whatever it is.
Yeah. Also, get out of my head just for a minute.
Totally.
Quit describing my every single day.
So yeah. Okay. So like, you wake up every day and you've got to like defeat this enemy. You got to go to work. You got to like crush this task. You got to, whatever it is, man. And I think that one of the best things that you can do is you're going to fight 1,000 tasks every single day, all day long. And you know, it is as simple as like, did you wake up on the first alarm or did you hit snooze? Like, it starts at that moment. So you got 1,000 tiny tasks that you need to accomplish throughout this day. And there's a level of resistance on almost every one of these tasks. And I think the important thing to do is to recognize you're accomplishing the task as you're accomplishing it, not set some 4-month goal. I'll be satisfied when this is complete, but recognize that 4-month goal has 1,000 tasks per day in order to achieve and accomplish it. And recognize that you're accomplishing those tasks as you're accomplishing them gives you this gives you the reward.
And that kind of go back to what you said, how incremental progress scales exponentially. That.
So yeah. So like, I'm writing a book on happiness, right?
Good. You should, because this is like the stuff that
gold.
This is awesome. I've written, like, no joke, I know people can't see this, but I'm holding up a notepad. It's full of
Yep.
quotes from what you're when you're just like
Cool.
talking from your heart, man. And
Yeah.
I love it. So yeah, thank you for writing a book.
Yeah. So I'm going to fill you in on I'm going to brief you on my book, because I was flying to PRI in Indianapolis and I unlocked the formula to happiness.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. And it's actually a formula. It's simple. It's just really hard, and it's going to be hard the rest of your life. And I'm sorry we're not talking about building cool stuff. Maybe we can touch on that after I brief this. But
No, that's fine. This is the big picture to building cool stuff. Like, let's be honest.
totally. Yeah. This is how you get happy building stuff.
We're connecting on a human level, and we're all humans, so we all have that in common. And then from there, it goes into the minutia of every day. So this is perfect.
Okay. So the 20 years of the contemplative introspection that I've done focused on happiness, what I've determined is that happiness can't be quantified, but gratitude can, and they are directly proportionate, 1-to-1. You influence one, it moves the other. And if you can't target the intangible happiness, but you can target the tangible gratitude, let's focus on increasing gratitude. So if there are plenty of external factors that can influence the things that you're grateful for, but those external factors are something beyond your control. So let's not focus on building those, because you can't control that anyways. And if you have a bunch of those, great, good for you. I'm happy for you. But we're going to focus on the things that we can consciously control to increase our gratitude. And gratitude, in order to get gratitude, you need to do something gratifying. And the only way to do something gratifying requires attention and effort. The greater the attention and effort, the more gratifying the results. So this is where you can quantify gratitude, because your attention and effort can be assigned a value. You self-assign it, bounce it against the market, come up with an agreed upon value of your attention and effort for whatever that is. So attention and effort is just 2 words to describe self-discipline. So now you apply self-discipline in the form of attention and effort at an assigned value, and you have the opportunity to exchange that value for a storage of value. And we all grow up to think in terms of money, so like dollars. So now this attention and effort, you can store it in dollars, collectible motorcycles, stamps, real estate, whatever you want. And you now have the opportunity to take that attention and effort and run it through the process of gratification. And what the process of gratification is taking that attention and effort and removing it from the exchange and putting it into your cup of gratitude. Because if you're truly grateful for something, you would never trade it for any amount of value, any amount of money. And if you would trade it for some amount of money, you're probably not truly grateful for it. So once it passes through gratification and it comes off the exchange, you can't ever exchange it for anything again, because you're grateful for it and it's in your cup of gratitude forever. So really, it's as simple as be fucking disciplined. It's that simple. And being disciplined, there's self-discipline, there's external discipline. External discipline is a contract, whether it's morally or legally binding, between you and an external source, and that will sort of force you to be disciplined. But then there's the self-discipline. Either way, it's still attention and effort in, or through, I guess. Because creativity flows through me, and although it is with me, it belongs not to me. So it flows through you.
Yeah.
So really, where that circles back is this comes right back to the artisan and craftsman who are applying their attention and effort as hard and as focused, and as they're putting in these systems and subsystems in their life that are yielding the highest returns on their attention and effort. and that's why they're so grateful and happy. Like all of these people that you interview, it's like all these people that you're interviewing are assassins in attention and effort.
Mhm.
And that's really where it comes back to. And they're all generally happy people.
Yeah.
Like some of them abundantly happy.
Of course. Move over Tony Robbins, by the way. Holy crap.
I think I need a bigger head for that.
Yeah. Need a bigger hat for that too, eh?
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Okay.
Awesome.
This has been incredible. I'm loving it. We're an hour in and I could just keep talking about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I got a couple more stories if you care to hear them.
Well, our next, like, I just want to know, like, no man is an island, right?
Right.
Did someone inspire you to get to where you're at? Or are there some people, whether it's professional or personal, whatever it is, that inspired you to kind of, or planted seeds or has fueled kind of your passion?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the seed was planted, with my dad building trucks, and he wasn't like an expert level fabricator or builder, but like, he was out in the garage and he wasn't afraid to cut and weld something together. And I think that that's really where it started. And there was a point when in my late teens that was like a big shift for me when I recognized my dad was looking to me for advice. And that was crazy because he was always the guy who, told me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when he's valuing my opinion, I was like, hold on, there's like this cognitive dissonance here. It's like reality is not what it's as it's perceived.
Does
like,
not compute.
Yeah, that. And to touch on the thrash, this ability to thrash. I've got a quick story. This little Hilux that sort of started my whole media tour was we did a show on Netflix called, what's it called? Fastest Car, where four like regular kind of sleeper cars would race against a supercar in a 4-wide drag race. And you're not supposed to know who any of the competitors are until you show up at the racetrack. But what these purple hair Southern California filmmakers didn't realize is that the car community is very small. And when they told me I was in, I went and found out who I was racing against because I have a large reach and like it's a small community. And when I learned who I was racing against, I was like, oh man, I need way more truck. And
the light bulb went off.
Yeah, so that's when it went from a 500 horsepower truck to an 1100 horsepower truck, and it was on a limited time frame because TV is on a need to know basis, and they don't tell you until you absolutely need to know. And I had, for 9 days straight, I had only gotten 2.5 hours of sleep every single night. And then it was just thrash as hard and as fast and efficient as you can to build this truck. I rebuilt the entire truck. New engine, trans, twin turboed it, 4-linked it, like whole new truck. And at the tail end of those 9 days, there was 3 whole days where I got absolutely zero sleep, none. I had to trailer it from New Hampshire down to North Carolina to go throw it on the dyno at Tick Performance. And it was about noon when I showed up. They threw it on the dyno. First pull, it made 800 wheel horsepower, which was a big surprise for everybody. And we did 3 pulls. Third pull, we ended up bending all 8 rods. And the next morning, I had to be at the film shoot location to do my doc day and all the filming. Like all of Netflix was there for me.
No way.
Yeah, so I blew the motor up at noon, and I was still like 3.5 hours from where I needed to be. And so I got on social media, and I was like, "Hey, anybody in Greenville, South Carolina, want to meet me to help me do a motor swap in this truck?" And bunch of people showed up at this location. It was my buddy's shop, and he had a machine shop, not a auto fab shop or a mechanic shop. And he's like, "Yeah, you can use my shop, of course." 7 people showed up, people who I had never met and they had never met each other. So these strangers, again, relying on the kindness of strangers. And Tick Performance, they gave me a set of used pistons and rods, and I think, yeah, that was it. And they said, good luck, man. Sorry, I wish I could help more. And so when I showed up at my buddy's shop to do this engine swap, everybody's like, when's the new engine coming? And I grabbed this cardboard box full of used pistons. I was like, this is it. We got to hope that the inside of this engine's okay. And we stayed up all night doing an engine rebuild, pulled it out, rebuilt it, put it all back in. We got it fired up, and I made it to the film shoot location like 2 minutes early. It was supposed to be like at sunup or whatever time it was, but I made it there like exactly on time with basically unknown engine. And so it was like, we had the race the following day, and there was no room for error. Like, oh, we'll do this tomorrow, because tomorrow morning before sunup, we all start shooting. And I don't know if I've told this story publicly. So we were sitting in the stool when they got the background, all the cameras and the lights, and they're interviewing me, and they're kind of like narrating my story with my own words, by the questions they were asking. And these guys, they're not car guys at all. They're filmmakers. And so he asked me the question. He's like, so what's your strategy? How do you plan to win in a 4-wide drag race? And I'm like, that's not how you drag race. You run your own race. It has nothing to do with the other people. So me being a smart ass, I'm like, well, as soon as the light turns green, I'm going to turn right and take everybody out. Because the whole time I've been talking about, I'm like, I don't give a shit about the truck. It's about the people. It's about the experiences. I'm like, I'll wreck the truck. Truck means nothing to me. It's like, that was a little bit of a stretch, trying to be a tough guy, I guess, because now it means something. But
yeah.
And then I tell him, I'm like, I'm going to wreck this thing. I don't care. I'll take everybody out. That's how I'm going to win. And then we have to do a bunch of rolling shots. So, we're on the highway, and they've got their camera car, which was a van. The doors open. They got their $40,000 cameras hanging out the side of the van. And, they're like, do a drive-by. So I have to accelerate and go right by them. They're like, do it again, a little faster, like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm just screw it. So I just put the foot down, and I'd never driven an 1100 horsepower car. I've never driven this car like this. It's got all new suspension. This is like the first time I've driven it, like at all. And so I go to blow by them, and I was like, I know what they want. They want me to spin the tires by them. So I crush it. It blows the tires off. We're doing like 55, and it was a fully automatic transmission. And it starts spinning, and then it just grabs gears. So now the tires are doing like 200 miles an hour or more. And it starts to get a little bit squirrely, a little bit sideways. So I let off. And that's where you grab traction and you straighten out. But when the tires are doing 200, it takes a long time for the tires to slow down enough to grab traction. So now I'm still spinning my tires, and I ended up in a tank slapper, and I got 90 degrees in the road at 55 miles an hour, and I T-boned the camera car. We all end up in the ditch. I totaled the camera car, and like I hit the cameraman that was hanging out of the car trying to record me. My hat blew off out the side of the window because I'm doing 55 sideways in the highway. And and I couldn't tell them that, like, hey, I've been up for like 2 weeks straight. In the last 3 days, I've gotten 0 sleep. I'm not in the condition to do this. And if you watch that episode, you can see me. I am so ragged.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell them that because, like, there was no options. I had to do the things.
Yeah.
And so now we're all in the ditch, and I'm like, are you okay? You okay? Everybody was fine. And they had clearly never been in a situation like this. And I'm thinking, like, oh shit, we got the fire trucks coming, the tow trucks, the ambulance, the police cars. And I'm looking at my truck, and I'm like, there's no way. My truck looks like a pile of crap. And I'm like, there's no way they're going to let me drive this thing out of here, just because of the way it looks, the way it is. And they're like, does your car run? Yep. Like, okay, well, if you want to just meet us back at the shop. And I like do the boogie look around and just bounce. And I'm like, I don't care if my tires are locked up and I got to skid out of sight. I want nothing to do with this big scene that's on its way. And so if you watch this episode, the whole front end of my truck is like wrecked in the next scene and they say nothing about it. And then they had to pull me aside and they're like, listen, some of the next scenes that we need the cameraman to ride along with you to get some interior shots. And based on some of the things you said in the interview and how I was like, I'll wreck it. I don't care. And then I wreck it. And they
then you follow through. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I did it. But like, if you would have asked me, even still, like, hey, do you think that you could stay awake for 3 days and work really hard and not mess anything up? I would say absolutely not. But I did it, and it's like a mind over matter thing. Like how strong are you? You know, how much can you suffer? And that's not like a rhetorical question. That's a challenge. You know, how much can you suffer? Like, what can you take? How strong are you? And, you know, that taught me a lot about myself, is like just trying really hard. And I think that's to some degree what I've applied my whole life, and harder and more so now. And now I have a more of a philanthropist point of view, and I'm trying to take everybody with me.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's a good, I don't even know what to say.
Holy. How many?
I also know how to TIG weld. I've used a grinder.
Yeah. Yeah. Build things, metal, cars, you know.
Yeah, that's it. It's like, I just want to do me as hard as I can. And I want to inspire others to do them as hard as they can, because there's no reason not to.
Yeah.
Like you die once, but you live every day. And it's like, do you live, or are you just paying bills till you die? Like, what's your purpose? Find a life worth living.
So you talked a little bit about wishing you had kind of a mentor on the business side of everything when you were kind of growing up. It seems like you're on the road a lot, traveling. How do you balance the work with the fun, the travel, the build? Something you break down. You said you've taken the Hilux across the States 9 times. How do you find that balance?
So I didn't for a long time.
Okay.
And it was not good. It seemed great, and I was like, yeah, I'll deal with the repercussions later, and like I'll wait till the external discipline starts crushing me and I have to act. And like I just as a functioning member of society, not that good. And like that's a weird, vulnerable thing to announce on a public platform like this, but like it's true. We all struggle with something. We're all like, I'd love to try to pretend that I'm this master, I've got it all figured out, but nobody knows what they're doing. We're all just fumbling through this life, and some people are better at it and more directed. But, you know, some part of the reason why I built my own CNC machines is because like I didn't understand how money, life, and discipline worked well enough to be able to afford my own. So I'm like, okay, well, the only way I'm going to get it is to learn how to build it. Like I can leverage my intelligence to acquire this item versus leverage my, you know, financial wealth, which I didn't have. And, you know, now I've just started a new company. It's basically just a sales and marketing company, where we have a development team that's developing performance modules for turbocharged vehicles. And the way it works is it's like stepping back into the 90s in a way, where it's a piggyback system that sort of interrupts the sensor signals to the computer and manipulates them. And then the factory ECU does all the work in increasing the horsepower, adds a little more boost, changes the fuel and timing curves, and you get 10-15% more horsepower, but it doesn't leave a trace on the computer. So it leaves the factory warranty intact. You know, so if you've got a brand new car, or one of the first things we're starting with right now is UTVs. So like, you know, those guys buy those things and they buy the turbo one specifically because they want to go fast. They want to have horsepower, and they want to have fun and adrenaline and excitement. And we're just, after you have a fast thing for a while,
You want it
you know,
faster.
yeah, well, like hedonic adaptation takes role, and it starts to be like it doesn't feel fast anymore. So you need something to like renew that vibrance and make it feel exciting again. And that's what this does, but you get to keep your warranty on your vehicle. So the other thing is that, like, this touches on the business side of things, where like now I understand how money works. And if money is a goal of yours, and it's just a tool, it shouldn't be your end goal. If money is the goal, then like you need to understand how it works. And I got burnt out trying to sell my labor for money. And I'm just like, there are ways to do it and good ways to do it and be successful in it. But those ways that are required, I just like wasn't really for me. So now we're doing this company called GoTech Performance, which allows me the freedom to pursue, the things that make me happy, which is, now that we know the happiness formula, self-discipline in the areas that I want to do it. So I get to build whatever I want, and the way that I want to do it. And I'm not necessarily a conduit for somebody else's vision who's leveraging their finances against, my attention and effort. So yeah, that's kind of my new direction, is like, I'm still going to build probably wilder shit than I've ever built before, because now money isn't the obstacle. Now the only obstacle is myself.
Yeah.
I feel like that this like hands-on work and the business skill sets, or the skills required to, like, there's always push and pull on that. I mean, as yourself, you know the tools, you know how to do the work, but then that whole business side, people can flourish, people can flounder. It's a whole nother set of skill sets. And even for myself, I went through business management at the university and had that. And I remember the contracting a little bit, and you'd throw your receipt in like the back of the truck and whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And then my mom at the time was doing all my books, and she's like, "Hey, we're missing like 5 or 6 receipts." And you're like, "Oh crap." Like, you're trying to go through stuff, and then you kind of learn it and you start keeping record, but it's a whole nother thought process. And when you've been on the tools and doing the work, to move into that mindset of, okay, how do I properly run this? Right. It's a whole new learning curve.
And I think that ties back into my little ecosystem picture, is that, like, the goal of business is, the business is supposed to support the things that you want to do in life and make your life better and easier. And if it's not doing that, you're doing it wrong, and for the wrong reasons. So like, identify what you want to do is the first thing. And that's something that, like, I feel like most people don't know what they want, and they're in survival mode. So they're like, okay, I want to make some money so that I can do what I want, but then they don't think about the thing they want. And like, money's often not the thing that they actually want. It's just a tool to get what they want, and they need to identify what they want first. So like, if you want to be creative and build cars and do paint work or welding or whatever, and you have a heavy resistance and don't want to do the book thing, then like, you need to put a system and subsystem in place that handles that. And whether that's your mom or whatever that is, it's like a picture puzzle pattern door. Every time you open the door of what you want to do, there's another door of things that you don't want to do. And you just continue down that road. And every time you open that door and you find an obstacle, it's like, well, that's not what I want to do. I want to do this. And you put a system in place to support the things you don't want to do. You built a bigger ecosystem, and now you're building something bigger than yourself. And you're allowing, and all these systems are supporting you in the direction that you want to go. And if that's just, you want to be in the shop focusing on your craft, or you want to travel, or whatever it is, spend time with your family. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, but the business should be there to support your dreams, goals, and make your life better. And, you and I, not that great with books, with the actual business side of things. So build a system that supports that. It's that simple. You either need to decide that you're going to get good at that, or you're not.
Like, have somebody else do it and take care of that, so you can put your focus and attention.
You need to get so good at the thing that you're good at that it can support a system that supports that. Like, you have a common goal.
Yeah. That's a good thought process around that. Put your time into what you want to do, and if there's things that you don't have, a system in place where you don't have to worry about that, and it's going to give you more time to focus, put your attention and detail on.
And then you get better,
skill
better,
sets.
better, and then it compounds.
Yeah,
Like,
and therefore
sure.
you're more grateful.
I've got so many friends that like so passionate about building cars, and that's my world is cars. They're so passionate about cars, and they started their shops, and they build a speed shop or a custom shop or a fab shop, whatever they're building, and they build it bigger, bigger, bigger. They got 10 employees, they got 20 employees, and they're very successful by most measures, but they found themselves in a position that like they don't enjoy what they do, and that's such a tragedy, like a heartbreak, because they want to be out there building cars, but back to what you were saying with their ego, they're not willing to release the control on their empire that they've built to a manager, and so they can't. Like, you've built this giant empire and it's taken you your entire life to get to where you're at. You're going to hand it over to somebody, hope they run it right. Like, if you're smart, you'll recognize that person's going to run it better than you.
Yeah.
And you'll go do what you're good at. But like, you don't hire the idiot that's
But finding the right person for that position is the hard.
For sure, but like that's
part.
not impossible. There are a lot of people who are brilliant at that, and that's what they want to do, because and put everybody in a position of like, what if how can I help you? Like, oh, I really want to run a successful hot rod shop. Sick. I have one that I don't want to run.
Yeah.
Like,
perfect. Yeah. So you're a wealth of knowledge and just experience, and you're not scared to share things that can benefit others and learn things from others that will benefit yourself as well. Not in a selfish way, but just in a common human way. Do you have any advice for someone who wants to get started in this area, in the fabrication, let's say specifically automotive fabrication space?
Yep. Advice I would give. I think that it's important to make yourself vulnerable and like share your failure, because I think that experience is the currency of life, and the negative experience holds more value than the positive experience, because negative experience is resistance, and resistance is where growth happens. So if you can embrace your failures, that's the fastest way to grow. If you ignore and hide and you're embarrassed of your failures, like, you're hurting yourself. So I would say that, if you want to weld, welding is a big part of car building. In most cases, you have to be willing to suck at it. Because you're gonna suck. Everybody started from zero. Everybody. Nobody started as a master. Like, women seem to be generally better welders, so they're going to start a step ahead of you. So check your ego at the door.
100%. I see that in my class every single time, every quarter.
It's crazy.
It's amazing.
Yeah. My chick Kaylee, she's a TIG welder in the aerospace industry, and she's just like, right from the get-go, just crushing it. Like, her first welds, I was like, okay, yeah, you can build the rock sliders for my truck.
Yeah.
Here you go.
I'm like, yeah, I'll call that mine. We'll put your good side up, and I'll call it mine.
Yeah.
With regards to, I'm sure you've probably talked a little bit about this, with regards to like technical skill sets to develop getting into this fabrication automotive, what would be some specifics, like technical skill sets that are important to have or develop?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, to develop, because you're not going to get them, you have to make them. So I think that what a lot of people don't realize getting into this is that as an automotive fabricator, 90% of your job is grinding. Most people don't recognize that. They see that, like, oh, you bend the tube and you get to weld it. It's like, well, yeah, bending it took 10 minutes, welding it took 5 minutes, but grinding it to fit took an hour and a half. And you have to accept the fact that most of your job is grinding, and you have to get good at it. Cause like, just cause you're taking metal off doesn't mean you're doing it right. There's I've taught a lot of people how to fabricate, how to weld, how to grind. And there is a lot to know on how to use a 4-inch angle grinder. It seems like a simple tool, but there is a lot of intricacies to using it. Also, the flap wheels, are you familiar with those?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like a go-to for so many people. Like you get them at Home Depot, whatever.
Yeah.
90% of the time, that's not the right tool for the job. Most of the time, this would be like the single biggest tip I would give for somebody getting into fabricating on their own. Don't use the flap wheel. Use a flat sanding disc. I use 80 or 60 grit, and a variable speed grinder is a huge help. I use a Milwaukee that's got a variable speed. It's got a dial on the end. It goes from 1 to 6. And, if I'm using a hard wheel, like a stone or a cutting wheel, I turn it all the way up to 6. If I'm using a flap wheel, which is very rare, or a flat sanding pad, it's down like 4.5. I don't know what the actual RPM is on this. Or if I'm putting a wire wheel on it, I'll turn it down to like 1.5 or 2, and then you don't end up looking like a porcupine when you're done.
Yeah.
But I would say that those are my biggest tips on the largest majority of your time that you're going to be doing as an automotive fabricator is grinding. Use the right tools. And most people don't even know that the flap disc is the wrong thing. The flap disc will make it smooth, but not flat. The flat sanding disc will make it flat and smooth.
Mm-hmm. And there's probably less opportunity to remove material with that flat sanding disc.
Nope, it cuts just as hard and
Does
fast.
it? I just mean like I've seen kids use the flap disc as in place of like a thick disc to grind.
Yeah,
off,
like a stone.
like a stone, and they get waves and stuff like that. Because wouldn't the flat sanding disc be a little more flat so that you're not kind of digging?
Yeah, you get that. And like the other thing with the flap disc is that it technically has suspension to it because it's flaps.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to grind a weld, it is conforming to the shape of that weld as it rides over it. So you're trying to grind, say you're doing the corner of a bumper or something on an off-road truck, like you're trying to grind that weld down and it's going up and down, on the dimes of your weld, and it's going to be a little bit wavy, even if you're really good at it.
Yeah.
Whereas the flat sanding pad is not going to do that.
That's awesome. I never thought about that.
It's going to do it a little bit, which is why, you want to grind in that particular instance where you're grinding the corner of a bumper. You want to keep that perpendicular to 12 o'clock at the grinder, and you want to grind in the direction that shoots the sparks off the edge of the material. And it's not so much about where the sparks are going as much as it is the suspension in the sanding pad or the flap disc is coming off of the material instead of onto it. Because when it comes onto it, it's gonna dig in and then ride up and then wave down.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's coming off, it's already compressed all the way around until it drops off. And then once it drops off, it's not on the material anymore. So you can actually have a square cut edge.
Oh, that's cool. And you're not taking away any of your source material that doesn't have a
Right.
weld on it either.
Exactly. And that's the big thing is
Yeah.
like you can actually get down to flush, and that's it, and only flush.
I remember when I took some training at Wyotech, and one of our sheet metal fab comps for MIG welding was to make a mini roll pan, and we made this mini roll pan, and then we put like a mini license plate space into it. We cut it out and Frenched it in, and then it was like butt welds with the MIG.
Yep.
And as we were grinding it down, I had so many pinholes in my source material because I was grinding and I wasn't watching where the other part of my disc was hitting, because it was hitting the rest of the roll pan, and now it's wavy, and it was just, but I learned a ton. But yeah, it makes sense for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like you probably learned a lot about body fillet.
Yeah.
So where do you I'm like, you've done this, like, where do you stand on like tech and trade schools versus, like just going straight to real world?
I'll be honest. I went to Wyotech because I saw it on TV.
Yep, totally.
And,
I signed up for Wyotech twice.
And
super senior.
Yeah. And I spent, in my opinion, way too much money on it. And I learned it, but then I came back and I started working in a rod shop, and then I ended up being allergic to primer dust, so that doesn't help. And
Brutal.
so I ended up getting into sales and that side of things. But I think there's a lot more. My instructors were great because they had a lot of real world experience, but we still didn't come out of there with a ton of real world experience, right? Like until you cut your teeth in a real shop and you come out, and it's the same with university. We're both teachers, and you know, the education world in university is a completely different world as it is when you're actually in the classroom in front of kids, right? It's all theory, it's all best case scenarios, those types of things. But then that I don't think you learn a lot of that common sense stuff that you learn from the old guy who's been there for 40 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that, I think you're touching on similar to how I feel. And I asked you because you have experience with it, and then like you've been in the industry, in the world, like, and you know, being in university and stuff. Like I value that insight, and I think that I'm in the same position where like I signed up to go to Wyotech twice. I don't remember if it was TV or they came to my school or whatever it was, but I was like, I want to go to that.
Yeah, and
I was like, this is what I want to do forever. All I wanted was the chassis fab and high performance engine class. Apparently that was an elective that was like $5,000, and then I had to take a $26,000 class in order to get it.
You had to do like automotive or auto body or diesel.
None of which I cared about. So I signed up for it. I was like, screw it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to come out of this a badass. I get my paper that says I know how to do it. And then I got cold feet and I decided not to. And then all my friends went. And while they're going, they're sending me pictures and telling me about it. I'm like, damn, all right, fine, I'm going. So I signed up again. And then they came back and, you know, telling me how awesome it was and how much they learned and what they got to do. And I was super envious, but excited because I was signed up. And then they're in the real world and they're getting in a bind. And when they get in a bind, they started calling me. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, hold on a second. I'm like, you just paid $32,000 for this. Why? I don't understand why you're asking me. Like, I haven't even been. I don't know what you know.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, I was like, you know, I don't think this is the right move. So I went and just got a job doing what I wanted to learn. And I bounced around and I moved laterally. You know, I would go to a job, and in, you know, a couple of months, if you're really disciplined, you can learn 80% of what that job has to teach you. The problem is the last 20% is going to take you 4 years. So I'd learn the 80%. I'd move to a new job. I'd move to the grinding station. I'd move as a welder. I'd go be a machinist. I'd go be a sheet metal fabricator. And I just bounced around. I learned body work and shipping and everything, all in the matter of a couple of years. And I got like a really well-rounded skill set, but I got paid to learn instead of paying to learn.
Yeah.
And the way I see it, and I ask you because you have the experience and I don't, is that, you know, these trade schools, not that they're worthless, because they're valuable, but you have to set your expectations going into it, that like you're basically going in there to be exposed to and touch every tool. And then that's it. And then it's up to you to get in the real world and remember what that tool looked like and what its capabilities are. And then it's up to you to learn after that how to use it. That's sort of my thoughts on it. Like, it's valuable, but I worked at a hot rod shop for a little bit. I was a engine machinist. I sleeved
cool.
Boosted engines. So I did probably 750 engine blocks. And because of my relationship with the owner, I was in the office during all of the potential hiring meetings. So I got to look at all the candidates and, you know, what do you think? And almost every time there was somebody who came in, it was like, oh, well, I graduated from UTI or I graduated from Wyotech. It's like unfortunate, but we automatically knocked them down. And it was like, okay, well, they're worth less because they came from there.
Yeah.
Because they come in with a chip and an ego and a misunderstanding of reality. And it sucked because they spent, you know, $30,000, $40,000 on this education that, like, in this situation made them less desirable than the guy who came off the farm and said, yeah, I've done an engine rebuild in the tractor in the middle of the field. I'm like, okay, we want you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a hard balance, I find. Like going through apprenticeships, working in shops, it depends on the shop experience, I think. Like in my case, did my cabinet making red seal. And lots of the students, lots of the guys I went to school with, they maybe only operated 1 or 2 pieces of equipment for 4 years, and now they're a journeyman. Where I was fortunate enough to be in a really good shop where I was building cabinets, doing CNC, spraying, installing, a whole, being that well-rounded. It depends on what shop, whether it's hot rod, welding. I mean, depending what type of work you're doing. And lots of people ask that, like, is the apprenticeship or trade schooling the way to go? Up in Canada here with the apprenticeship, it's depending on the trade, 4 years at 10 weeks a year. So it doesn't cost a whole lot. And I came out as a journeyman at 25. So I had 5 years in, and then I went to university, became a teacher. What about those guys that have been working from 18 and they're now 55? I consider those, like, they have the skill sets, they have the know. I still feel new at this. Like, I've got 5 years in, and you just right. Like, it's a hard, I'm not going to devalue or undervalue what I did and different people. And I think those red seals are a good baseline, and depending on what you want to do, but there's also a lot of people that put the time in who don't have schooling, aren't trained by an education facility, that have a ton more knowledge and skill sets than somebody, right? Like, it's just, it's a
Totally.
It's a different conversation because lots of people can get fired up about it. And
for sure.
you know,
yeah. And it's like, especially people who have taken the classes, like it could easily feel like I'm attacking them. You know what I mean? But like, that's not it. Like, there's still a lot of value in it. You just need to realize that you're not coming out of it as an experienced builder. You're, like, you got an experience, but you're not a master builder because, you painted a car.
100%.
There's theory there. I think that's the struggle too, even in school, different students, there's theory side and there's hands-on side.
Yeah.
So you can rock the theory, you can, get A's, whatever, but then you get onto the floor, and I mean, that's where it takes time to develop that. I mean, some people are book smart and they can hammer it out. Some people take a bit of time and really have to try to get through that book part, or the theory part in school, but it's the on the tools, on the job. That's what takes time to train and develop. And, these institutions, there's a lot of theory and a little bit of time on the tools, but what is that saying? Is it 10,000 hours to perfect something? Yeah. So you're coming out, you need to put that time in and practice and that whole working up too. You got to start at whether it's 0 or at that time, hopefully you've got some skill sets, but you got to build yourself, and slowly, repetition, I find too. Yeah. You got to continually repeated to do stuff to be able to get better and to move on to the next thing. And then you've got this whole fundamental understanding of how things work, and you can apply your skill sets to that.
Yeah. And I think that, if you're going to move into the real world and, practice a craft, whether it's woodworking or leathersmiths or whatever, like, I think that early on, you have to pick a direction no matter what. And the direction is like, do you work for somebody else or do you work for yourself? And if you work for yourself, what's that look like big picture? Is that, you're going to have a crew of guys, or are you going to be a solo craftsman? So you have to pick the direction. And, if you decide that you want to own your own company and do your own thing, because the profit margins seem like they're higher, and they can be if you do it right, usually not, but then if you go that direction, I think it's important that you understand how money itself works and how business works. It's, I think that there's nothing wrong, and like in some ways a lot better to just be really good at what you do and do it for somebody else. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And ultimately, like, long term, like, probably going to be better off, like, you got to be kind of an elite and an anomaly to do really well as an independent builder who doesn't work for somebody else. If you look at all the people in this world that build stuff, the majority of them end up working for somebody else because it's difficult to do it yourself. And there's a lot of people that I look up to, a lot for the way they've been able to do it. They've been able to master their skills and leverage it, financially to live a a prosperous life. They get to do what they want, and then they don't have to worry about what it costs to do what they want. But there's a balance there, and I think that people need to be aware that it's more than just, I will weld this for you if you give me money.
Yeah, exactly. So to kind of wrap this up, the last question, which you've talked quite a bit about the grinder, so I'm interested to see if that's on the list. Top 3 starting out tools for fabrication, automotive.
Yeah, totally.
Whatever you can fit in your hand, maybe.
Yeah, just borrow everybody else's shit.
Yeah. There we go. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, hold your friends' hands that have sweet shops. Put those in your hands. So grinder's definitely on the list. And it's my opinion that like you want a variable speed grinder. And they're not that expensive. I think you can get these grinders for $150, $170, somewhere around there. And they might be a tiny bit heavy, but like, I don't know, work out, get some strength, use it more, and it won't be that heavy.
I don't know, get muscles.
Stop hitting the snooze button and go to the gym.
Grinder would be on the list. And then, you're going to need a welder if you want to stick stuff together. So whether it's a TIG welder or a MIG welder depends on, kind of how you want to brand yourself. Because MIG welding is probably the most common and the easiest and cheapest. You can yield the highest volume produced with a MIG welder, but TIG welding is much more of an elite thing. It takes so much longer to prep the parts because they need to fit much more precisely. The process of TIG welding itself takes longer than MIG welding, but it's like a much nicer end result. And if you're going to TIG weld something, if you're a guy who only buys a TIG welder, you're a TIG only shop, you generally do much nicer work than the guy who has the MIG welder. So it's like, where do you want to go? Are you about getting a bunch of cool stuff done, or are you about the craft itself and the process itself and just trying to do the best that you can? And if you're really more about the self-mastery and mastering the task and the quest, it's like, I would say get a TIG welder. But just know that it's a lot more work and you're going to have to charge a lot more, which that sounds good, but it's a lot more work. Like if I build the chassis, right, I've got my CNC tube cutter. One guy in 5 days can build a full chassis, like a monster truck chassis, all by himself with all the 4-link mounts on it, fully welded if I MIG weld it. It's a lot of work. We're talking 8-9 hour days. But if I were to TIG weld it, it takes about 2 full-time weeks just to weld it. So like that's the difference between MIG welding and TIG welding. It's like triple 8 to 10 times more time just to TIG weld it.
Wow.
So
which is reflective in the cost.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're looking at like with material prices now, it's a different conversation, but you're looking at the difference between a $8,000 chassis or a $25,000 chassis, and they're both shaped the same, but one of them's TIG welded. So, I would say grinder and a TIG welder, and
a beer can.
If you wanted to get like, what's that?
A beer can?
Yeah, right. And if you wanted to get like professional hobbyist about it, an inexpensive plasma table, and you could literally be like, you could build almost anything. You could build an entire vehicle. You can build the control arms. You can build the chassis. You can build almost anything you want with a welder, a grinder, and a plasma table. I know a plasma table is a big item, but like if you had 10 grand to drop on starting your own hobby shop, you could pull that off. You could get a plasma table, a really nice welder, and all nice equipment too.
Yeah.
So that would be, it seems the plasma table seems far reached for most people, but how much do you love it?
Well, you can get some decent plasma tables for like a lot of the like prosumer stuff. like the Lagmeyer, you can get like a
Langmeyer,
you can get it like a 2x2 or 2x4 for, was it like $1,500 or something like that? Not including the plasma cutter, but.
Well, something on the plasma table, since I've built a handful of them, I think that most people overestimate the size of the plasma cutter that they need, because you think that you need a 4x8 because I want to do a bumper, I want to do that. Once you really start making stuff, you realize that a 2 foot by 2 foot bracket in the automotive world is enormous.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing on your car that's that big, not one piece. So a 4 foot by 4 foot is where I landed, because I can lift a 4 foot by 4 foot piece of 1/4 inch steel onto my table by hand. If I had a 4x8, I'd be buying 4x8 sheets. And when you go pick up the material at your local steel supply, you can get it sheared in half. It's like $10 or something for them to shear it in half. And then you get these 4x4s that are a manageable size, and it's way big enough. I almost never, ever need anything bigger than my 4x4.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Josh, this has been amazing. We're almost at 2 hours. I feel like it's been like 20 minutes.
Just in the intro of
we're just
the
in
podcast.
the intro. Yeah. Stay tuned for part 2. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, sharing your passion, sharing your big picture thoughts, and your philosophy on life with us. It's been amazing, and I hope a ton of people can get a lot out of this episode. And as we kind of outro out here, I want you to promote whatever you have going on. What do you want to promote on the show? What should people check out?
Okay. We're Vague Industries, VAGUE, on all social, and then we've got the DeathWish show. And you find that on Amazon Prime. That helps me the most, but you can also find it on YouTube and Facebook Watch. And my new company that we're just starting now is GoTech Performance, and that's performance modules for turbocharged vehicles. And we'll be developing modules for almost every new turbocharged vehicle. So look out for that.
That's amazing. So what we'll do, we'll put all these links in the show notes of this episode. And thanks everyone for listening. We really appreciate your time today. We hope you get a lot out of it. Please go and follow Josh, and keep his social media, YouTube, everything. It's very entertaining. It's I binged when I first found your YouTube channel. I spent like 2-3 hours just binging all your stuff. It was awesome. I couldn't get enough of that truck, that Hilux build. And it's just so cool. So thank you so much, Josh. And thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Hoff.
Thanks, Rosie.
And we'll catch you guys on the next one.